In this video, we're going to continue talking about how do we construct this confidence interval for a population proportion. In particular, we're going to talk about a procedure we can use using the software StatDisk. And so here, we are going to construct a confidence interval for a population proportion. So remember, notationally, the p without a hat, that is going to be the population proportion. That's what that represents. Remember that p hat, that is going to represent the sample proportion. And the value n, that represents the sample size. So those are some notationally some values that we should remember, some things that we should know. And so in StatDisk, here's what we need to do. The first thing we're going to do is check that a couple requirements are satisfied. Check that these three requirements are satisfied. Now, I say 3. It's actually kind of 6 because one of them is a low-key 4 requirements that we need to check. So the first requirement that we are going to check is the sample a simple random sample? So you'll check that. With that simple random sample, if you have something where you say, we're going to choose all of these people that are chosen in a very, very specific manner that is not random, then you don't have a random sample. So be really careful about that. The next thing, this is where we have hidden, where we're actually checking 4 things. But really we're checking to see, do we have a binomial experiment, right? And that binomial experiment, it had 4 items that we had to check through. So do we have a fixed number of trials? Are the trials independent? Can the trials be classified into 2 categories, success and failure? And is the probability of success from trial to trial equal? If it satisfies those 4 things, then we have a binomial experiment. And then the last thing is we need to have at least 5 successes and also at least 5 failures. Really, if we don't get this, then we don't quite have enough information to say, yeah, it looks like this is the proportion that are going to be successful or proportion that are going to be failures. We need to have enough on either side to say, yeah, this one didn't happen by random chance, but it looks like it's representing the entirety. It's reflecting what's going on in the entire population. Next, you want to identify a few things. Right? So we're going to identify the confidence level. You need to identify the sample size. And you need to identify the number of observed successes. Now, sometimes that number of observed successes, sometimes that's easy to identify. Other times, the number of observed successes is a little bit trickier. And the same is true about the sample size. Sometimes it's really straightforward. Other times it's a little bit trickier. We'll look at some examples of those things or talk through some of those in some later videos. All right. Then in StatDisk, here's what we're going to do. In StatDisk, we are going to select analysis, confidence intervals, and then we are going to choose proportion, 1 sample. We're dealing with 1 sample in this chapter. We're trying to estimate a proportion for that 1 sample. And so once we have selected that, that will open up a window where we need to, in that window, input that confidence level that we identified earlier. We need to input that sample size, and we need to input that number of successes that we identified earlier. So let's go over to StatDisk and just see what this looks like. So in StatDisk, so we are choosing analysis. We are choosing now confidence intervals, and we are dealing with a proportion, 1 sample. So I choose this, and this has 3 different values we need to input: the confidence level, the sample size, and number of successes. So if we can identify those, and we've identified that we are doing confidence interval, and then those other 6 things have been checked off, those other 3 things have been checked off, then we can go through this process. All right, in the next video, we will finally look at an example. I'll see you guys there.